just had an interesting thought. There are a lot of people, young people right now in particular, let's say, in this culture, the way this culture exists right now. I'm in the Pacific Northwest near Seattle. And there are a lot of people who, in our country, in our world, in our local culture, who are who are making the mistake of abusing alcohol and all sorts of other chemicals and drugs. And we tend to think that the reason we have people who are abusing these substances so dramatically that their lives are destroyed, they're on the side of the street in the middle of Seattle in that horrible, terrible, hunched over zombie body position thing that we're seeing, or they're just crashed out, they got needles sticking out of their arms, literally, I've walked by and seen it, or they're failing to thrive in this society and they're blaming the fact that they get, stoned 3 times a day or they drink constantly, right? So we're looking at substance abuse. And people look at this and they say, people are doing substance abuse because the world is too hard. And because the world is so hard and so challenging and they're so overwhelmed, they are trying to feel better through substances. Okay, that's one of the arguments. But I just had a thought that I think sort of completely blows that out of the water. And actually, the reason they're doing this is because this world that we've created is so damn easy. So, Native Americans, people who lived exactly here in the same location 500 years ago, before anyone from the old world had encountered this specific side of the New World. People who were living here in a way that had endured for at least 7,000 years. Okay. They didn't have substance abuse issues. I'm pretty sure from what I've read so far, what I've looked into, who I've talked to, all sorts of stuff, I'm pretty sure they didn't have the food process that creates alcohol. So they weren't drinking. This isn't like, the people in Northern Europe that were brewing grain into, because they didn't really, in this area, they didn't do that type of agriculture. They didn't have massive amounts of grain or grapes or potatoes even, they didn't do that. And so they weren't drinkers. And life was relatively easier here than in some places, but still life was more challenging than the current world. You could get eaten by a bear while you were out hunting. You did have to get up and use your body every day. You had to make every basket was hand woven by men or women in the village or the tribe. The neighboring tribe was going to come over and try to kill you and kidnap some of your women and children, and then you were going to go try to kill them. So the humans were a danger, the animals were a danger. The environment required you to be at your top physical capacity. It required you to do your best, to try your hardest to survive. And so they didn't have the luxury of conking themselves out with a drug that's going to leave them completely vulnerable and unable to protect themselves for hours at a time. They didn't have the ability to disconnect from their families and to not give and take with their fellow family members in order to survive. They didn't have, the ability to sleep out on the sidewalk or something by themselves, because you had to be close to the fires and close to the village in order to be most protected from wolves or mountain lions or whatever. So it's actually the ease of surviving in this society where you can actually, in many cases, you can actually be homeless. You can be someone who isn't working. And I don't mean those two actually line up. You can work very hard and still be able to struggle to pay your rent in a region that you live. That's not what I'm saying. But there are people who are getting food in their mouths, and if they show up at an emergency room are going to get medical care, and if they walk into a food kitchen are going to be fed. If they go to a specific type of a charity, they can get clothing. There are people who cannot lift a single finger for days, weeks, months, years at a time, and they are still fed. They still have clothing to wear. They are not being hunted by predators. They're really not being hunted in the same way by fellow humans. Their needs are met even though they're not doing anything to meet those needs. They are living off of the charity of others. And in most human societies predating agriculture, you didn't actually have the ability to remain alive after you lost your ability to contribute. And this was because part of contribution would be walking from the summer village to the winter village, walking from, if you're part of the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, they would only stay in any location for about 6 weeks. And then they would travel to the next location, which was 50 to 70 miles away. And then they would set up camp there, and they would eat all the resources in that area, hunt, eat the fruits and the roots and everything else they could find. And then when they'd done that, they would move to another big location, which had like a regional seasonal food moment. They would be there for a while. When that started to go, they'd go to the next place. And when you were too injured or too old or too unhealthy to make that 70-mile trek, they didn't just decide, oh, we're going to be nice to grandma, we're going to stay here. That's not what happened. Grandma made the trek on her own because they didn't have wheels, they didn't have wagons, they didn't have beasts of burden, they didn't have animals to ride. There was no way to get grandma from here to there unless grandma's own legs could do it. And of course, they didn't do drugs. They weren't abusing substances. They certainly weren't obese and eating crappy food. And they were constantly physically active. So their bodies were at peak performance right up until the point where something was going to kill them. And then that was it. It was over. And there was no long, prolonged period of being kept alive by the community. This is all pre-agricultural. Once we have post-agriculture and you have people who are remaining in one place for longer, one of the effects of agriculture is that you start to have that type of slow wasting away old age experience because it's possible. So back to the drugs, is that people today, especially young people who should be at this bright, peak, high energetic stage of their life, they should be absolutely, being the strongest members to a degree of the community, full of hormones and high energy, and their mitochondria are still popping, and they heal really fast, and they're out there, bada bada boom, starting their lives. People at that age should have challenges in front of them, and they should be meeting those challenges with not only all of their effort, but also their best intellect, a clean brain, not hampered by drugs and alcohol. And so when young people tell me that it's normal for young people to want to party and use substances, and that being a chronic user of substances like marijuana, which is very popular on my island, and there's a lot of people who are like, it's better than alcohol in that it'll mess me up, but it's not going to make me fat. It's not going to hurt my liver. It's not going to make me feel quite so tired tomorrow. And there's people who just use it chronically. But that is part of your privilege. You live in a society where the police are keeping you safe, so you don't have warlords running around, and you're not trying to keep yourself alive every day unless you live in the parts of our country where gangs rule the roost and run the streets. And there's a growing number of those places. But so it's just, I think the excuses, and the Native Americans around here, sure. Native people have always found things like psilocybin and ayahuasca and other types of chemicals that will have an effect. But these were ritualized. These were usually prized and treasured by the healer, the medicine man or woman, the shaman. They were used for very serious spiritual endeavors, attempts to, leave one's body and travel in the form of spirit, or to hear from the ancestors, or to commune with, the spirits, whatever. If they were used, it would have been in highly ceremonialized, intentional ways, designed to try to help the tribe survive. And once again, there's that survival piece. We would like to not die this week, this month, this year, and we're struggling to figure out, there's been a change in the weather system, which of course has nothing to do with human beings. It just happens on planet Earth all the time. And the oceans are warmer, so the fish are different. Or the whales haven't shown up yet. Or there was a fire and we have, our berry fields were wiped out. Where are we going to get that portion of the food that we tend to try and preserve for the winter? So anyways, it's not that our world is hard to survive in, and that's why people use drugs, because life is so hard. It's because life is so damn easy. You have the luxury of failing to show up and you're still going to survive. That's what we've done to ourselves. And now people are sitting around whining that they can't be kings and queens, because if you look at the middle class lifestyle in America, and you look at that and you compare it to everyone who ever lived in Europe ever before 1900, okay? The way we live, the resources available to us, the luxuries we have on a constant basis compared to the 1800s, 1700s, and everything going back, we are living better than all of the kings and queens, all of the lords and ladies, all of the nobles. Even though if you think about it, we really should say, I should say, I live the life of I live better than European nobility, and I happen to be living in the 21st century. I should not say I'm living a middle class lifestyle, because middle class, what does that tell us? It used to mean something sort of good. It was really the working class enjoying great material wealth. That is how the middle class following World War II should have been described. The bulging, middle of our nation, where people were enjoying extreme material wealth and ease and privilege like never seen before. This is the balm BALM. This is the balm of actually really taking the time to allow yourself to fully consider human life experiences in the past. And a lot of people think they think about the past, but they don't actually have a passion for it. So you only think about the past in the way that people ask you to when they're trying to prove a point. If you really have a passion for the past, like I do, then you've spent your life looking at, considering, imagining, stepping into the shoes of, reading books about, and perceiving the world through the lens of all the things that human beings have gone through around the globe throughout history. And I mean, when my children were growing up, one of my favorite things was to go to the local thrift shop, and there were older people here on the island who would pass away and their grandkids didn't know what to do with their stuff, so they'd take it up to Granny's. And you would find these National Geographics from the 50s, I think some from the 40s and the 60s, and you would open these up, and the oldest ones I could find, and they did a really good job. National Geographic was a decent magazine back then. Now it's been purchased, it's used for propaganda, but back then when it originated, oh my gosh, just all these stories. And that was what I would talk to my kids about. That's what I would read to my kids. Magazines that had been published 20 or 30 years before I was born, with photos from that time of people living around this world before we became so international, when a lot of these villages and tribal people still live the old traditional way. And just my life is full of all of these historical access points. So yeah, the why are people sitting around abusing substances in a way that makes them so vulnerable? It's because they can. And so it is the dark side of our achievements as a society. And if you have to work hard and try hard and sacrifice some things and delay some gratification in order to succeed in this culture, too bad. What do you think people were doing? How hard was it to actually go out with a handmade bow and arrow and maybe a spear with a spear thrower that you had created, and to figure out how you're going to go and hunt down animals that can smell you, that can hear you, that are prey animals that are well trained to run away from predators. And you have to go spend how many hours? What are you wearing? You don't have nice fancy shoes you bought at REI or something like that. You're either barefoot or you're wearing some sort of leather moccasin thing that took how many hours for someone in your family or in the village to tan that hide and to sew those shoes together. I mean, you treasure those moccasins, and you have to go out and you have to move with the most epic, gentle, quiet slowness. You have to not break a twig, and you need to spread a bunch of dirt under your armpits and your groin because you're trying to cover your body sense. So if the wind suddenly shifts, that those deer or those elk are not going to smell you and take off because they run 5 times faster than you do. So, that's what a person had to do. That's how they had to try, and they had to show up, and they had to work hard, and they had to fail at hunting so many times in their childhood, in their adolescence, in their teenage years. They were coming, when they came home and they failed, people looked down on them. People were like, okay, dude, go try again. Are you kidding? Really? And then you got your friend over there who's 2 years younger than you, and he comes back with, some rabbits that he caught with his sling or whatever. And, another one comes back, he caught some partridges, or he got, wild turkey and found their nest and brought home some eggs, and you show up with nothing. I mean, the shame, okay? You want to talk about shame? In the embarrassment and the drive to get back out there and get that stupid deer. And then maybe you're not going to eat as much. You might eat something because, there's this village communal living thing, but you're not going to eat as much. When the Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert would go out hunting, and they have their blow darts that have poison that they get from this grub that grows about 6 feet under the ground. So they have to dig these massive holes, and they dig down, down, down until they find these grubs. They collect these grubs, and then they smush them up, and they make this incredibly toxic, will kill you very quickly, greenish colored, blackish slime. And then they take their blow darts and they roll the tips in this slime. And of course, you have to make sure they never poke themselves, because then you're just gonna die. So this is what they use, and then they have these long poles, hollow tubes, and they blow the darts. So they go out as a group of men. The women do not hunt, because the women are pregnant and they're holding babies, they're nursing babies, they make noise, the babies make noise, and they can't carry as much other things because they're already carrying the humans of the family that matter. So they're out foraging and trying to not get killed while they go dig up roots and bring home plants and whatever, maybe ostrich eggs if they can get to them. So they're doing what they're doing. But the men, they go out and they're going to go hunt. Well, when they make a kill, when they successfully drop this animal, whatever it is, they then take the time to look at each of the darts that got into the animal. I mean, maybe there are 5 men, there's only 4 darts in that animal, and each one has a particular mark, a design on it that the men make, so that they can then identify whose dart was most related to the death of the animal. So let's say they're more likely to die if you hit them in the neck or maybe the belly, whatever it is. They go through and they take a look at the darts, they analyze the kill, and they come up with a hierarchy of who has primary, secondary, tertiary, who has the greatest claim to the kill. The first person who gets to choose what body part of this animal they're going to chop up, put on their back, and carry home dripping in blood to their wife is the one who had the dart hit the most vulnerable spot. And so that person gets to decide, what am I going to do with this? And then the next one, what part do I want? The next one, what part do I want? And because each kill, you're going to have a different person who had the best shot, this all works out. But still, they take the time to wonder about it. They don't have a hierarchy in their group of men about who always gets to choose first because he's older or because he's more powerful as a different class. It is based upon merit. Merit. You are most likely to have brought down this animal. You had the best landing dart. You have merited the first choice. What do you want? I want the brains. I want the intestines. I want the baby inside the mom that, has very tender flesh. I want this. I want that. And they all know what their wives like. So when they have a chance to choose, they choose what their wife most prefers. What does she like to eat? What does she like to cook? What's going to make her pleased with me when I come back to the village? The temporary village when it comes to the Bushmen. So my point is this. Life has always been hard. You have always had to try your hardest in order to get fed. You have always had to show up. You have always had to risk failure. You have always had many failures. All of this has happened. And it is really sort of the problem is that people living in this unbelievable, easy society have forgotten that. And they're now sitting around and whining about the fact that they have to maybe clock in and work in a safe grocery store, serving people and putting groceries on a shelf, and that's boring and it's not fun, and their phone has a scratch in it, and when they go home and there's really plenty of food in the pantry, but none of it's exactly their favorite food, and they don't have enough money to go to a restaurant and pay someone else to cook the food for them. So they're so pitiful. They're struggling. The society sucks. And I actually have to work 40 hours a week and then come home and still take care of my kids. And, I only live in a 1,100 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment that the rain never leaks through the roof. I have windows. There's no mosquitoes because I have screens. and I can turn a knob and pure clean water pours right into my glass. I can turn another knob and hot water pours into a bath, and I can lay around in a bath whenever I want to, and it takes about 7.5 minutes to fill that bathtub. And oh, my life sucks. No, it doesn't. Oh my gosh. People, the fact that you can abuse yourself and use drugs and not get eaten by a predator, you're doing great, except for the fact that you're having the wrong perspective. You've become a pity party, you're whining, and you have the luxury of being able to survive while being so stupid that you're going to abuse drugs to the point where you are not capable of living your own life. This is all your fault. Because there are plenty of people on this planet that are not only doing fine, but they're actually improving their circumstance. You're in America. There are a lot of countries where you're fucked and there's nothing you can do about it. Go to North Korea. There's, oh my gosh, so many places where you don't really have any options. You're in America. People are showing up here, not even speaking the language, and working their butt off and doing great. They're not all suffering immigrants. I mean, just grow up. Show up. Be grateful. See what you have. Achieve something. Work hard and stop abusing drugs.